Northern Kentucky University's Center for Public History presents a Premier Series for public historians. Today, we're learning about researching at the County Clerk's Office.
Hello, I'm Paul Tencutty, Director of the Center for Public History at Northern Kentucky University. We welcome you today to the Kenton County Courthouse, an historic and beautiful building here in Independence, Kentucky. Kenton County was founded on January 29, 1840 by the Kentucky General Assembly. It was the 90th county out of 120 counties in the state of Kentucky. Its boundaries are the Ohio River to the north, to the west, Dry Creek, that is the boundary with Boone County, Kentucky, to the south, Grant and Pendleton counties, and to the east, the Licking River. Originally, Kenton County was formed out of Campbell County, Kentucky. Today, it has over 160,000 residents, making it the third most populous county in the state of Kentucky. I'm often asked by genealogists and local historians, how do you conduct local county courthouse research? How do you look up deeds, wills, marriages, and things like that? Well, we're very fortunate today to have with us the Kenton County Clerk, Gabriel Summey. Hello, Gabriel.
Hey,
good
Paul.
to see you today.
It's so good to see you today, too.
I have a question for you. Why does Kenton County have two courthouses?
Well, as you had already explained, in 1840, Kenton County was carved out of Campbell County. So this was the main seat of the county. Then in 1860, due to a population change, or the majority of the population being in Covington, the local government decided that as a convenience to the citizens, there would be an additional courthouse in Covington. From here, it's a 2-day ride on a horse to Covington. So to accommodate that population shift, they created a second courthouse, and actually a second county seat. So when people had their records, whether it's their land or marriage, there was a dividing line between here and Covington, and that was the Banklick Creek. So that way people knew that any of their records were either kept in the Independence Courthouse or the Covington Courthouse. And they were literally, that dividing line was so that you weren't more than a day or actually a half-day ride from that particular courthouse.
So it was all about convenience and about population. And you're going to show us today that recording district and some examples from that. And to help you here today is your deputy clerk, who is Kathy Darple.
Yes. This is Kathy Darple, my deputy clerk.
Hi, Paul. How are you
today? She is in charge of my real estate and lien department, and she is going to show us not only how you would use the books, the older books, to determine your property, marriages, but also our computer system that we currently have in place. And that's very helpful to people.
Wonderful. Well, let's go in and take a look.
Okay.
Kathy and I are here in the record room in Independence Courthouse, and this is where everything happens, right?
Everything.
If people if they buy a house or they sell a house, they're going to have to come to you and record these in deed books, right?
Correct.
And why do they need to do that?
To show ownership to their property.
Oh, right, we have to make
Legally.
everything legal.
Correct.
And it's always been that way, all the way back to 1840 and even sooner.
Right.
We're looking here at a deed book 1, so this dates from like 1840.
This deed here is from 1841, when the courthouse first became the courthouse, and they plotted the property out.
And it's all handwritten.
Right.
So back in those days, people like you would have had to have a beautiful penmanship to do this.
The clerks wrote everything, yes.
Isn't that amazing? And it is so beautifully done if you look at the penmanship. And, you know, we need to know how to read script to go back this far, don't we?
We do.
Now, some of these deeds are going to tell us important things. They're going to tell us the boundaries of the property, right?
Correct.
So if we're looking at a city, it could be a city lot, right? A subdivision
Could be a lot in a subdivision, yes.
But if we're looking at a farm, it could be meets and bounds, and by that
acreage.
Acreage, so we could say it goes to this maple tree here, and it goes
To the
over
stone in the river, yes.
to the stone
I've
in the
seen those,
rivers.
yes.
So sometimes those things are actually shown on these deeds.
On the deeds, yes. When they recorded their deeds, they were actual on where their property lied.
And then you're also going to have things like over here that tells you so-and-so to so-and-so. So you're going to have a a grantor and a grantee.
Grantor is the seller, grantee is the buyer. Yes.
Is the buyer. So that's terminology that we need to know.
Right.
And it's usually going to end it up by saying that it's given over this property and any appurtenances. What did they mean when they would say things like appurtenances? Did they mean like buildings and outbuildings?
I think so. Any improvements, you'll see that wording a lot too. Any improvements on the building, anything that went on that farm usually went with the property also back in those days.
And
yes.
sometimes, and then it's going to say the date too of the transfer as
When
well.
they signed the deed, yes.
Okay. And if this is, now, of course, in 1841, if they were buying the property from someone, they might have said, as recorded, since Kenton County was only founded in 1840, as recorded in deed book such and such at the Campbell County Courthouse. So if we really want to go back beyond 1840, we're going to have to trek over to Campbell County.
We're going to have to go to Alexandria, yes,
Okay.
because Kenton came out of Campbell in 1840. So if you get to a stopping point and you cannot, it's beyond 1840, then you'll have to go then search the records over in Alexandria, right, in Campbell.
And these, too, are all indexed. So we don't have to just go in here. We don't have to necessarily know a date.
No.
If I say, Mr. Carson bought some property, and I think it was in the 1840s or the 1850s, and I know his name, and I know his first name, do I have a pretty good start at
Yes.
that point in time?
In
What do I do?
Independence, we have series books. We have 4th, 3rd, 2nd, 1st. First being from 1840. The 4th series stopping in 1991 when our computer system started. So if you know a date, you have a name, you can pull that book. So it's the last name. You said Carson. Carson, you would pull the C book, say from, let's do the 3rd series. You would pull the book by the last name. Then you would pull, say his name was James. You would pull the tab by the first name. And then there are vowels in this book, A, E, I, O, U, and Y. The first vowel and the last name. That leads you to a column. If you find your person, then you'll have a page number. Once you find that page number, you turn to that. On that page number, we'll list anything that James Carson done from that time period, whether it be a deed, mortgage, anything to do with orders, inventories, anything like that. But our series books is where you would want to start when coming into the Independence Courthouse. Sometimes in Kenton County, when people are searching for their property is actually a lot in a subdivision that will be actually platted. We have all of our plats in plat slides. They are all in sleeves, but some of the older plats that we have will be in individual deed books. But the current ones are all in our plat books on slides.
So these are plats, not plots. Do some people come in and ask you where cemetery plots are?
They do. They want to come in and they want to ask for their plot of their land. And I say that, no, we don't have their cemetery plot, but we do have a plat of their property. Yes.
So the more recent plats, they could be of, say, an industry, right, an industrial park, or it could be a residential subdivision.
Correct.
And if we go, or it could be that somebody actually made a plat because they owned hundreds and hundreds of acres and they had to divide the property up in a will. So there might be a plat showing that, the division of the property.
Correct. Usually in inventory books, people with their property long ago, they would divide their property into plats. And surveyors still use that today, the old plat.
If we wanted to look for the really old plats of the city of Covington and the different subdivisions that form the city of Covington, then we would need to go down to the Covington Courthouse, and they have
Correct.
similar plat cabinets like this as
Yes,
well.
they all have plats, yes, down there. We do.
So what happens if and this could be very useful for local historians and genealogists.
Yes.
We've looked up, say, their deed records, but now we want to know, who is this other person mentioned? Was that maybe a spouse? And so it would be helpful to look up some of the marriage. How do these marriage books and indexes work?
Well, again, we have an index, and most of these are by alphabetical order, and you can search them by the groom's last name or the bride's last name, her last maiden name. And then as well, you go from there, and once you've determined that those are the two people that were supposedly married at that point in time, you'll be able to come over here and see the actual year, and then it will reference a book and a page number. Then you would go to those particular books, be able to pull that and be able to see the actual application as well as the marriage license. Because in the state of Kentucky, you apply for a marriage license. Once they've been married and the person performing the marriage ceremony signs off of it, it is then recorded back here in this office.
And we would have the same recording district, basically Banklick Creek, between the Independence and the Covington courthouses for marriages and wills as well.
Right. Any separation existed for deeds, wills, mortgages, all of those things. As we move more into the computer age, there's a little bit of a blur because you're able to search in both places, but those original indexes will be in those specific places, Independence or Covington.
Now, speaking of wills, it might be interesting for us to go as a local historian or genealogist to a will, because sometimes you will be able to see who the children are, or sometimes you can even see who the executors of the will were, and we assume that executors were trusted people, so they probably were friends of that particular individual, and that can tell us something about the kinds of friends they had. What other things can they tell? So sometimes we have inventory books?
The interesting thing about wills is that in the state of Kentucky, you can convey property by wills. That's why it's so important that they are also kept in the district court as well as in our Kenton County Clerk's office, because you don't necessarily have to create a deed every time there's been a transfer of property. So if I leave you my home in a will, that's as good as a deed in the state of Kentucky. So that's why they're so important. They are part of the chain of command or the chain of custody when you're talking about a piece of property.
And so actually we may get confused, and we may be going back to the 1860s or something, and all of a sudden there seems to be a break in this chain, right? And that break in that chain might actually be a will.
Correct.
So we might see, using our example of James Carson, maybe James Carson had a son, Sam Carson, and all of a sudden, as we go back through the deed record, we're finding out that Sam Carson has this property, and we don't even know who Sam Carson is, but we can find it out by going to maybe a will record.
And again, you would start with the index, and you would be able to look for that information under that person's name in an alphabetical sequence. So at that point, then you would go and actually read the will itself, and you would have to find that particular, again, it would give you a it would give you a book and page number. You would pull that actual document, read it, see if it does convey property, so that you have now found your missing link.
That is a wonderful explanation. And now, sometimes we have old inventory books too, right?
Correct.
So if an historian wanted to know what was a typical house, let's say a middle class or an upper class house, looking like in maybe 1830s, 1840s, because back in those days they sometimes would actually inventory the silverware, the dinnerware, all of these things that we will not put in a will anymore because they're not as valuable as they used to be. You know, a china cabinet, a dining room set. Or they could, in some instances, even show some other things in terms of slavery, couldn't they?
They could. And the will books, as well as what they called the inventory or settlement books that came from probates, were very clear. And you can find they kind of reference each other because they were probated. So the wills were not only kept here, but they were probated, meaning that anybody could come forward and say, I dispute that this person gets this property. And that's why the inventory was so important, because things were of a different value in the past. And now wills are much more generic as to where things get passed to someone. And part of that has to do with the change in the laws as well. But at this point in time, you can look in the inventory books, and they will very specifically deed property. And unfortunately, in the past, they would deed slaves, they would deed china and silver, and all those things that were important to that particular person and who they were then passed down to. And that creates your chain. So sometimes you need to look at the inventories as well as the will books.
Kathy, you've done an excellent job telling us all about the different series, looking at the actual bound volumes of the deeds and also looking at the plat books. And we historians love to look at history chronologically. We like to start like with the county in 1840 and go forward in time, but it's not really that easy, is it, when we're looking up deed research?
No, it's not.
So the good news is, though, that the county began to keep computerized records,
Correct.
property records, in about May of 1991.
Yes.
So if I had a property that was changing hands maybe in April of 1991, probably a good transition area, what would I probably want to do?
You would actually want to check the 4th series in addition to the computer to make sure that you've covered all bases.
Now, the thing with doing historical genealogical research like this is we're actually not going to want to start in 1840, are we?
No.
We're going to want to go backwards. So
Correct.
we're going to want to start with the current owner.
Yes.
So that once we get the current owner, then it's going to refer us back to the deed prior to that, whoever bought it, and all the way back, and we can go all the way back to the beginning of time almost, right?
You can, yes.
So you're going to show us the computer and how to, you are dangerous on the property computer,
I'm
right?
dangerous on the computer.
Wonderful. Let's take a look at it.
Okay.
Kathy, we're at the computer screen now, and we have the public inquiry menu. Can you show us a little bit about what's on that menu and how to find property references?
Yes. Our computer system has the public inquiry menu. When doing a title search, you want to use 2 main inquiries. First, you would like to use the number 5, which is the PVA real estate bill history inquiry.
What does PVA stand for?
Property Valuation Administrator.
So those are the people that determine my taxes.
Correct.
Oh my.
So you would use that screen to find your deed reference first. After that, then you would use number 2, our record room indexing inquiry. And that will bring up anything from May of 91 forward.
So could we look up, say, the courthouse in Covington, which is 303 Court Street, and
Yes.
find something on that?
We can do that. So we would go into number 5, the PVA real estate screen. You would scroll down to location, and you would type in 303 Court Street. Once you find your address, you hit enter, and it will give you a description of the property location, who the current owner is, the taxable value of the property, and also a deed reference.
And the deed reference, we can go then to the record room, actually, and look up the deed book if we would like, correct?
Correct. You start with that deed. You pull that deed. That's your current owner. Every deed will have a back reference being the same property as conveyed to the grantor. It will give you another deed reference. Then you keep going to that deed, and then you just keep searching it back.
And we could find out when the county got a hold of that land and who owned that land before the county did, and all of a sudden now we've got a whole site history.
Yes. Then after you have your deed reference, then you want to check to make sure anything on that property from May of 91, what has been indexed under that. So you would go out of the PVA screen. This is our main menu, the public inquiry menu. You would go into number 2, the record room indexing inquiry. If you search under all records, the PIDN number, which I'll get to in a minute,
What
and
does
the
PDIN stand for?
property identification number.
Okay, thank you.
PVA set up the PIDNs in 1993. Every piece of property in Kenton County has a property identification number that goes with it. So if you search by all records names, the group, and the PIN numbers, you should cover everything on that property from May of 1991 forward.
That makes it very easy
Yes, it does.
to go back. And then the rest of the chain will fill in itself, because let's say we go all the way back to 1880 some, and they're going to say as purchased from and recorded in the deed book. And so now we can fill in all the chains. And as Gabriel told us, maybe part of that chain, if we come to a missing link, might be a will or something else.
Correct.
And if it goes back far enough, we may have to go to Campbell County, and farther back than that, we may even need to go to another county that Campbell was formed out of and do a complete search. And at one point in time, we're probably going to just hit a dead end, right?
Well, I think the Commonwealth of Kentucky came out of Virginia,
Absolutely.
so we might have to go to Virginia,
We
take a road
might.
trip to Virginia.
We might have to, or look up the original land grants.
Correct.
Gabriel, are there any future plans for the record rooms?
Yes, we are currently working on scanning all the back deeds, and I mean all the deeds from May of 1991 back to 1953, so that there's a full 60-year search available online. We will not be stopping there. Once that's available in index, we'll continue to scan, and have as many of our records available online. It also is a great way to preserve records. That means that they can be properly microfilmed and stored with the Kentucky Department of Library Archives. We have all of our marriage records from 1840 currently scanned. We are indexing them so that they will also all be available online. So we are working on that preservation issue.
That is very good news for local historians, genealogists, and everyone else, and thank you for being such a great custodian of our records here
Well, thank you.
in Kenton County. Kathy, any final advice for us?
Well, when researching a title, it is very time consuming. So if you are concerned about anything in the title, it is best to consult a legal attorney, somebody that is proficient in real estate title searches.
That is very good advice indeed. Kathy, Gabriel, thank you very much. This has been very informative, and the people out there can find out what new things are available by checking out your website. And we thank you again for being part of this
And the
discussion.
website is called Kenton County Online Records. It's www.kcor.org. And people can look a lot of the records up online. Again, currently that just goes back to May of 1991. And thank you so much for coming.
Thank you.
Thank you, Paul.